guys, this is Smithy. Welcome to my channel. Today's video, we're gonna see if we can dupe the Adept AMYLOVES palette or not. I feel like that palette I'm drooling over. But does this girl need all the cool tone color story in the market? I don't know. So we're gonna start and dupe the AMYLOVES palette. Spoiler alert, I tried duping it and this is how the palette looks. Now you can be the judge of yourself if this looks similar or not. I'm not gonna call this a dupe just because I know for a fact Amy's palette is gonna be like amazing. And also, spoiler alert, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna buy that palette, but I wanted to just give you an option of getting close to the color story that palette is if you have these palettes in the collection. So if you're ready to see how I duped the vibes of that palette, then keep on watching. Let's begin. I have Ensley Rain palettes in this. Majorly, I would say, is the Cold Moon palette. And I have a few Adept shades also in this palette. As you can see, you have a lot of deepening shades and so does her palette too. I've tried to dupe the vibes. I am not sure if I have come close or not. I'm pretty sure these pinks are not like that. Just spoiler alert. Let's go row by row. The first shade is called Lights Up, which it looks like a champagne shade with like a pink and a green like shift to it. If you do have the Sugar Drizzle Red Panda palette, I feel like the shimmers are pretty close here, okay? Pretty close. I feel like it comes close to this shade, the first shade in the palette, which is called Bamboo Snack. So I'm gonna swatch that actually and show you how that looks, because I feel like this shade, you might be closer to that. Again, it doesn't have that green shift to it. It looks more like an icy pink more than anything else, at least in this shade. And the swatches that I've seen on like Amy also looks like that. Ignore that swatch, okay? But that's how that bamboo shade looks instead of lights up. Again, I adore Amy. I've not met her personally, but I feel like it comes across that she's such a sweet, genuine person. And for the sake of her, I'm gonna buy that palette, okay? Okay, the second shade in the palette is called Pink, and I feel like mine is definitely a little bit more on the purplier side. I feel like I have a shade similar to that in the Red Panda palette, and the shade is called Masala. This one, it's like a strong pink shade, okay? It's like straight up pink. It doesn't have like those shiftiness or anything like that, and I feel like I come close to that shade here. I also have a shade called Cine, which is here, which is like a mix of that baby pink shade and this shade, that masala that I'm swatching. But I feel like this is definitely like a deeper pink shade. Is that more deep? I feel like that's more deep. How about we swatch the other shade? We are trying to figure it out together. So yeah, let's swatch this shade, which is Cine. This Cine shade looks more like a true pink shade. This shade Masala was a little bit more on the deeper side. I feel like this shade might come close, which is like a true pink shade. Let's swatch that and see. Yeah, that is definitely a pink shade. Yeah, I feel like that's more close. What do you say? Am I close or am I dreaming? I feel like this Cine shade is definitely more pink. At least on my end, it looks much more pink, okay? And I feel like that's a good comparison to that pink shade in the Amy's palette. We'll see. Let's move. The next shade is called Mocha, which I feel like it leans more gray purple. So I use this shade, and I'm thinking that this is also from the Cold Moon palette. This one is the shade, yes, it is from the Cold Moon palette, and the shade is called Catmint. So let's swatch that and see. I've seen many people swatch this and it looks more gray purple, and I felt like this is a good shade for that. So there you go. That is duping the shade Mocha. I think that we are pretty close. The next shade in her palette is called Floral, which is like a pink, but it is a little bit on the mauvier side. And this is also from the Cold Moon palette. And I picked out the shade Forbidding from the Cold Moon palette. And this is definitely, it's pinky, but it is a little bit more on the mauvier side. So let's swatch this. Yeah, you can definitely see this, like a mauviness coming through as compared to that other shade. So I think this is pretty much close. Can you see that mauviness coming through? I'm excited about that. The next shade is called Glam, and I actually picked one of my Minka shades. But I know that the other shade, the Glam shade, is definitely a little bit more on like the rosier side, which I feel like there's a shade here in the Red Panda palette, which is, I feel like pretty much exact dupe, and that's the shade Lining. It looks silvery, but it is that glam, rosy shade. Let me swatch it and show it to you. Like, do you see that? How similar that is? Yeah, if you have that Red Panda palette, I mean, it's so stunning, you guys. That's beautiful. It has that rosiness to it. I hope you can see that. Really, really pretty. Okay, let's move on to the next shades. The next shade is called Pisces. I'm a Pisces too. The next shade is Pisces, and I picked out, oh my God, stop. I picked out the shade called Weather Balloon, and this one was from the Elements 115 palette. And this is like it's a purple, but with like a green base. Can you see that? And that's exactly how Amy's shade also looks in the pan. So I felt like this is a good comparison to that shade. I'm pretty sure there would be some difference, but this comes very close. It's grungy. The green and the purple all is like coming through. I personally can see green and purple both. Yeah, I feel like this is really good. You see majority like a green shade coming through, but I'll show you in the outside lighting too. There's a strong purple shift to it. The next shade is called 1997. It seems so, I seem so old when I listen to that 1997. I'm an 89 born, okay? So Amy's like way younger to me. 1997 is when my sister was born. So you've seen her in a couple of videos. This shade I picked out, let me see, from the Cold Moon palette again. The shade name is called Garnet. Now Garnet is like a brown, but definitely more like neutrally brown. It's not too warm, too cold. It's very neutral toned. And I felt like this can come super, super close to Amy's shade. There you go. And that's the shade comparison for 1997. I felt like Amy's shade was a little bit more light. Plus, she is a very, very fair person. I'm more of a medium tan person, so that can also vary. But also, Amy's video is not the only video that I refer to. I refer to Karen's video. I also refer to Dr. Ash here, their video, so that I can get like a better comparison for you guys. The next shade is actually called Lavender, and that's the multichrome in the palette, in Amy's palette. And this is also from the Cold Moon palette that I am like duping out with. And the shade name is called Keon. And this looks purple, obviously, to you guys. It has a blue, green, like so many shifts going on. It's unreal. And so is, I feel like, Amy's shade. I think the only difference here is that this Keon shade is definitely more holographic, and Amy's shade is not holographic and more multichrome. Amy has one holographic shade in her palette, but definitely not lavender, as you can see. Can you see that purple, blue, gold, green coming through? That's the shade Keon, duping the shade Lavender in Amy's palette. How am I going to fit all of this? I don't know. Okay, the next shade in the palette is called Mi Amor, and this I duped with the shade which is called Commander DF, also from the Element 1115 palette. This dusty blue kind of a shade. I feel like Amy's palette's blue is a little more deep, but you tell me, is it good enough or not? Because I know for a fact that this shade is buildable and this looks nice. I just feel like her blue, Mi Amor, is more dusty as compared to this. But for the sake of the video, I'm gonna just dupe it with this shade. Again, not a dupe, but definitely a similar kind of shade, I would say. The next shade is called Indie. She loves indie makeup. Loves it, absolutely loves it. I feel like I started loving indie makeup after watching her videos. I just love her to death. So pretty. And that shade is more like a green, blue, purple kind of a shade, but hers is a holochrome. Mine is more like a multichrome. You see strong green, but it has like a blue and a purple too to it. So let me swatch this. Because in some of her photos, it looks so green and some of the photos look so blue. And mine definitely is more like purple, green, blue. Did I even say which shade was this? I'm pretty sure this was from Strawberry Moon. This was from Strawberry Moon. This is the first shade in the Strawberry Moon palette from Ensley Cosmetics. And this is the shade swatched for you guys. Oh, you see strong green. I personally see a lot of blue and purple. Oh, that'll be hard to show you guys. Plus with the angle. There you go. Let's swatch the rest of the 5 shades here. The next shade is called Stunning. I say stunning a lot. She does too. Stunning is more of like that silvery shade, like a true silver shade. And she loves her silvers. And I'm pretty sure this is also from the Cold Moon palette from Ensley Rain. And this one, yes, it is from the Ensley Rain palette. And this shade is called Kalikansaros. It's from this palette, okay? Okay, so let's watch that. It's a stunning, stunning silver shade. Look at that. I also feel like this palette also has another shade, a silvery shade. But now I'm thinking, or is it similar to that? Let me swatch that shade too. Let me swatch it right next to it. And I'll tell you this. Yeah, I think it's more better like this one. Okay. Change of plans. Let me wipe everything and then I'll tell you. So the next shade, Stunning, I have duped it out with another Cold Moon shade. The shade name is called Wolf Moon. And this is like a stunning silver shade. Very, very sparkly. Can you see that? That's stunning, you guys. Like, if you wear that shade, it looks like liquid metal. That's a stunning shade in my opinion. And that I feel very comfortable saying that it is a good dupe to the shade Stunning. The next shade, Caramel, I feel like we can get from that Pretty Grunge palette, okay? Because she mentions like it is like a silver, but it has like a hint of gold in it. And I feel like this shade, Maverick, is pretty much like that. It is like a silver, but when you place it right next to the silver, it looks more gold. So I'm like, okay, I feel this is the similar vibe. So let's watch that. Yeah, you can see that goldness coming through. So that's the shade Maverick. Can you see that? From the Huda Beauty Pretty Grunge palette. I feel like that should be pretty close. The next shade is called Billion Much, which she named after her son. And I duped it out, this shade, from another Cold Moon palette. This shade is called Mother's Night. How apt. It is more of that deeper gray as compared to this shade. In her palette, it looks very, very similar to the other shade, which was mocha, but it's when she swatches it, you can see mocha being a little bit more on the purplier side and billion much being a little bit more on like the deeper gray brown side. There you go. Maybe mine is a little bit more darker. I don't know. I feel when I compared it, it was pretty similar. The next shade is called Vibes, and she uses the word vibes a lot. And this is more like a gunmetal-y shade, but with a hint of purple in it. I feel like the shade, the strong AF is like a gunmetal, but it has like a strong purpley shift. Let's swatch it and see. I feel like that will be more close. Yeah. I feel like shade-wise, this is more close, but it is lacking a bit of sparkle and shine. You tell me. And the next shade is called Scrunchy. Scrunchy is like a deeper brown but with a wine tone to it. And I actually took this from the Harvest Moon palette because it has that winey, purpley vibes to it. I don't know if it's gonna be that deep in her palette. Let's see. Yeah, I feel like it's pretty close. Yeah, I feel like it's pretty close. So that's the shade Duping, the shade Scrunchy. Yeah, I feel like this shade that we compared to Billion Much was a little lighter in her palette and mine is a little bit more deep. Because in her palette, this is the deepest shade, the Scrunchy shade. So those are the comparison swatches in my palette as compared to her palette. We're gonna do a look. Let's do a look. I'm gonna show you this in the outside lighting so that you can see all the swatches and the comparison, how it looks in the sunlight, in direct lighting, and then you can make your choice if you do have the Cold Moon palette and the Pretty Grunge palette and the Red Panda palette, if you need it or not, or else, I mean, who am I to even say? If you love Amy, if you love Adept, you should get it. I feel like I'm gonna get it. But to the people who love the color story and do not want to splurge on a $68 palette, $68 or $69 palette, then I feel like if you have the Cold Moon palette and the Red Panda palette, you have it covered most of the part, I would say. But yeah, let's put it on the eyes and see what look we get out of this palette. I know I'm already wearing a liner. Ignore that because I'm doing a wear test on a foundation. And the foundation wear test is going pretty strong, I would say. So let's start off with this shade, which actually dupes the shade Mocha from her palette, which is that purpley tone. And I'm gonna take that on the crease. And you can see now on my eyes, it's definitely less gray and more purple. And this is from that Cold Moon palette. And I actually saw Karen also use the shade on her eyes. And it was showing much more like purpley rather than gray. And I know for a fact I saw it in Amy's video that she mentioned that she put like a lot of deeper shades in the pan and not lighter tone, even though she's a more of a fairer person, so that it doesn't show ashy on a deeper skin tone person. And I've heard from a lot of people, she's very, very caring about those things. She's very considerate about all those things. Like it's inclusive with everybody. Like, yeah, that shade looks amazing. Let's move to this shade, which is the shade Scrunchy. And I am gonna take that on the outer corners of the eye. Right there. And this brush is definitely a little bit more on the fluffier side. It's not like packing brush. Right there. So you see that winey tone coming through with those purpley shades, right? And I'm also going to take that on the outer corners of the lower lash line. right there. Let me repeat the same thing on the other eye. So once we have that, I'm just going to take the same brush that we use that crease shade with and just blending the edges. I love that. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is, how about we take this shade, which was Brilliant Much, on the lower lash line. And then let's take this shade, which is the shade Lavender in her palette, and I'm gonna take that on the center of the eyelid. This is the shade Keon from the Cold Moon palette. There you go. And then I'm gonna take this shade, this one, and this is also from the Cold Moon palette. It's called Forbidding. Or actually, yeah, let's take this and then I'll show you the Glam shade too. Okay, so let's take that on the inner portion of the eyelid and then melting it with that Keon shade. It's such a stunning mauve shade. I love this shade. This also gives me to just feel like how would I feel with like Amy's palette if I had that. And so far I'm loving the vibes that I'm getting. So I don't see myself regretting it if I buy it. Okay, I love that. Okay, now for the inner corners, actually let's dip into that Red Panda palette and then take that shade Bamboo Snack, which dupes the first shade of the palette, at least what I duped it with, and put that in the inner corners. You can see how icy and light pink it is, like very light. Okay, it's very icy, I would say. And then I'm gonna take that shade Lining, very, very, very stunning. Okay, and I'm gonna just tap that on top of what we have going on. And I'll show you the difference. Like, look at that and look at that. Like, it's so much more kapow on the face. This palette is stunning for you if you love a pinky palette, especially a glam look. It's gonna be stunning, stunning, I would say. Okay, I'm gonna go back into that first shade. Actually, there's nothing in the brush. Whatever was left over in the brush, I'm just gonna melt it across like that. I love the way how this turned out. I really do. I'm going to finish off this eye with some liner and mascara and I'll get right back. So that's my final eye look. Did I get the vibes? Yes. But am I going to buy it? I think yes. But I also feel like if you do have the Cold Moon palette and the Red Panda palette majorly, I know I did use a few shades from the Pretty Grunge palette too, but I feel like if you do have these two palettes, you can get very, very similar vibes to the Amy palette from the Adept Cosmetics. And by the way, if you are buying the palette from Adept Cosmetics, it launches on May 1st and you can use Amy's code, or I do have a code also. I have my code Smithy Sony to save you 10% off. And this, I feel like if you're a cool tone person and if you do not have these palettes in your collection, of course, it's a no-say. If you do love cool tones, you are absolutely gonna love this. Absolutely gonna love this. I cannot wait to play with this even more. And I like the way this palette is looking in front of me, and it's only gonna be much more better in person when I have the Adept palette from AMYLOVES. I'm 90% sure and leaning towards getting it because I do love cool tones. I love purpley tones on me, and I know Amy loves it too. And I love that she didn't go like the gray route. Instead, she went more like purpley pinky route. I mean, Amy screams pink to me. And I'm more of like that purple person, and I feel like I'm getting a great vibe out of this palette. So that's my take on it. I wanted to dupe this palette. I felt like I came close to it, but I know for the fact that this is not a dupe. So that's my final thoughts. I love Adept's palette. I really hope that it is more of a formula to the Flying Fiddles palette, because I love those formula. It never creases on me. But I also saw when Amy was like swatching it, it's a little bit more on the creamier side, you know, it's not like grittier side. So we'll see how it lands, but I am loving the look so far that I created. So again, if you do have the Cold Moon and the Red Panda palette, you can live without having it. But otherwise, if you love cool tones, I feel like that's a great purchase to have. But that's all for today, guys. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did like this video, you know what to do. Do give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring the notification bell so that you're notified every time that I post next. I generally upload 3 videos every single week, every Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays at 9 AM Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.